Sonic Frontiers released after a 5-year gap in the mainline series, with a comeback that's meant to steer the series in a better direction. There's a lot the game did right, shedding the boost style some, introducing a new gameplay formula, and piecing past story and characters together in an admirable way. All things I talk about in greater detail in my review video. But one important point I made was that Frontiers is not great only for what it is, but for what it could mean for the future of the series, which is what most of Part 2 is about. It's still too early to see these effects taking place, but there is something more immediate we can look into, and that's the DLC updates that were revealed shortly after Frontiers' release. I had my speculations about what these could offer, so now it's only appropriate we check them out in detail and see how these changes fare a year after the main game's release. So I'm going to be going in order of release, but I do have to mention that I didn't get around to DLC 1 until after number 2 had come out, so there may be some things seen in the first section that weren't out at the time. But anyway, onward to March 23rd. DLC 1 had promised a Jukebox, photo mode, and new challenge modes, so let's start it up. We get these prompts telling us of the new features, and then we see that the title screen has given us more options. Going into extras first, we'll do some customization. The Santa suit isn't new, but I hadn't used it before, so that'll be our outfit for the time being. The Koco have a springtime appearance option, so we'll pick that, despite the conflicting seasons. Back at the title screen, we may as well try out our new modes, since we're already here. Battle Rush is first, and we initially only have access to Kronos Island. Our stats are loaded in from a cleared save, so our challenge comes more from the timer than the fights themselves. This is basically a time attack battle challenge that features a variety of enemy types in a 10-round bout. It's capped off with the appropriate Supersonic Titan battle that initially seemed like a good way to replay these bosses. The problem is not only the unrelated rounds leading up to the Titan, but the fact that our endgame stats make a joke out of these guys. So it won't really be filling in that niche left by the main game, giving us no real way to replay them. But to be fair, that's not exactly what Battle Rush is advertising anyway. Defeating the Titan will not do anything, unless you complete that island's matches with an overall S rank. So if you're good enough, you'll fight your way through Kronos, Ares, Chaos, and Uranus. And that S rank isn't all that easy to obtain. Most individual rounds can be perfected easily, but doing it all in succession can be quite the frustrating time. This mode ends up highlighting the jankiness in Sonic Frontiers battles, and turns what I mostly view to be a pretty fun combat style into an aggravating experience. If I were to write my first draft of the script during this section, I'm sure it'd be littered with obscenities. But the truth is, after taking the time to really learn each round, its quirks, and how to cheese it, the Battle Rush was a bit of fun. S-ranking each round felt accomplishing, and at this point, the Titans started feeling out of place. The full scenes are intact, which was really annoying on repeated retries. And the non-fighting sections were thrown in too, like climbing up Giganto with his weird gravity fields, or the extensive running segment for Wyvern. The majority of your allotted time will be sucked up by these bosses, with very little wiggle room due to the automation. I just began to feel like Battle Rush would be so much more fun, not to mention concise, without each of the Titans. But with enough practice, we have Kronos, Ares, Chaos, and Uranus all completed. S-ranks across the board. With that finally over, let's see what it is we won. Oh, so our reward for doing all that is the opportunity to do it all again. All 4 of them strung together this time. This really feels like a slap to the face. I wasn't stoked to S-rank these all to begin with, so doing the exact same thing on repeat was a really daunting thing to jump back into. But no use sitting in the menu complaining. We can do that in the trial. In reality, this one wasn't too bad, and luckily, it didn't take me many tries. I already had most of my patterns down from the individual trials, and there may have been some extra leeway from the time saved between island rounds. I think the worst part of it is each attempt is at minimum a half hour, so a loss means a waste of a good chunk of time. And all of the prior quirks still apply. One mistake could set off the whole gauntlet, which is annoying as it is, but even worse when it genuinely doesn't feel like your own fault. The Ghost Round is the worst thing they could possibly add to this mode. It feels completely hit or miss as to whether or not you'll have a clean match, or something stupid will happen, throwing off your whole time. In the end, I ended up perfecting every single round and crushing that S rank. A huge relief to move on from the battle rush. But first, we'll collect our prize. We get a title screen icon as a permanent badge to show our victory, as well as a new difficulty being unlocked. This extreme mode could be a fun challenge, but I don't plan on starting fresh anytime soon, so we'll carry on. Our other new mode on the title screen is the Cyberspace Challenge, where we replay the levels for S ranks. At first, I was thinking we already did this, but double checking arcade mode shows that it doesn't keep track of your ranks, just your times. Besides, this new mode strings all the levels together, which I guess counts as new content? So just like with Battle Rush, this level rush divides everything into 4 island rounds, all done in succession. Though this time, it lets you continue on without first getting that S rank, though that is our ultimate goal. Initially, I was dreading this challenge based on my time with Boss Rush, but that feeling quickly faded. I'm much more familiar with the levels from my in-game S ranks, and many levels are pretty lenient with the S ranks to begin with. 1-2 will be an early hurdle, and there's something horrendously devious about having that drift level here, followed by 3-6. For context, drifting has never felt natural to me, and 3-6 feels like it was made by a Donkey Kong developer. No matter, getting a good early buffer helps with Sonic Drift. And Sonic Kong Country is really just a game of survival. Clearing all 4 sets of levels unsurprisingly gives us an all-island mode, so let's do it to it. Though I just want to quickly point out how much mileage they got out of these stages. There's the initial playthrough in-game, then the replays for all the keys. They give you arcade mode, and then Cyberspace Challenge. And once completing that, they string all 30 stages together. It's safe to say I mastered these all by now. So now we gain our reward, which is Cyberspace Power Boost. Testing it out, it gives us that electric blue speed boost you may recall from the islands. Just, we don't need max rings here. This is pretty cool, and it looks dope. Just, I'm not planning on replaying any Cyberspace stage anytime soon. Plus, it marks any attempt with an asterisk, which kinda takes a bit of the fun away. But what's fair is fair. Back at the title screen, we can also peep out our new badge for Cyberspace Victory. But I think it's time we finally jump into the main game. The first thing we will notice is our springtime Koco are really just giant eggs. Why do I suddenly have the urge to break them open? There's some cool designs here, even one that looks like Shadow. I mentioned in my other video that I've never really been into photo modes, but I'll push myself to use this here and there. All motion will be completely paused, so you'll have to set things up right before bringing up the menu. And you'll have various camera control options. My biggest gripe is that it is often hard to get the camera low enough to get Sonic centered in the frame. It's like it was made for a character much taller than he is. Once you frame things right, you'll be able to add on your choice of filters. And the photo function relies on screenshots, which works. I'd just prefer if it had an in-game gallery to save the snapshots to. But let's move from visuals to audio. The Jukebox is the final thing added into DLC 1, and there's a good amount of songs to listen through. We start out with 13 tracks, a good mix across many games: Heroes, 06, Mania, Forces, though my favorites to start are Angel Island and Mystic Ruins, since they fit the Chronos landscape so well. But there's more where that came from. As you move along, you'll discover some notes, which each unlock a new track. It was always fun anticipating what the next song will be, and matching it to whichever game it's from. There's many of these to collect, and you can see all of their locations scattered across the map. Getting them all is pretty quick and easy, as you only really need to reach them. I would have liked if there was a bit of a challenge to be had, like chasing after the sea shanties in Assassin's Creed 4. That minigame would work so well for Sonic 2. Though to be fair, some of the notes are a bit out of the way, so it's not completely void of challenge. The cool thing is, some of these notes are on theme, being located in areas appropriate for the songs, like various desert tracks being found on Eras, or Red Mountain on the Cliffs of Chaos. There's even some notes on Rhea Island, which was nice to see since that section feels underutilized. There's various forest themes here, and Misty Lake is found at the foot of this waterfall. Nice touch. The only ones of these that weren't all that exciting to obtain were the various island movements. It's nice that you can switch to these, but I feel like these should have been the default tracks unlocked. There's no real indication that you've collected them all, you just have to see if the icons are absent from the map. The player, I feel, could be a bit better. Right on the D-pad goes to the next track, but left doesn't go to the previous. There's a list view, but your visibility of it is pretty limited. There is an option to switch to shuffle or loop. I just wish there is a quick toggle option or a way to reshuffle the playlist. And all of the island movement tracks coming up in shuffle kind of kill the vibe, so a way to edit your playlist would be a nice feature. The new tracks really had me jamming out while exploring the island, so it was a bit upsetting that the songs cut out when viewing the map. Restart when you die. Or are replaced entirely when facing a guardian. But with all that said, The Jukebox was a great addition that gives us a total of 52 tracks not included in Frontiers. Some of my favorites were Desert Ruins Zone 1, my favorite level from Lost World, Aqua Road, an incredible track from Forces. That OST doesn't get enough credit. His World E3 version, which is a real deep cut I wouldn't expect to be included. And Night of the Wind, probably the most underrated Crush 40 theme. Of course, all of the songs were great to listen through. There's so many bangers in here that definitely brought up some great memories of Sonic's past adventures. Before moving on, I want to check out this map checklist. I'm guessing this is a feature of Update 2, due to the 2 new symbols I don't recognize, and the absence of a note completion icon, but it shows a few things I missed from the base game. I tried my best to do a full completion, but if you remember, I could not find that last era's medal, and that's highlighted here. I ended up searching this online, and I was relieved to find I wasn't the only one stumped here. Thank you for the guidance. I was a bit taken back by the incomplete Chaos Island medals, but on a closer look, I guess I missed this very last one. Easy fix. And lastly, the Uranus Guardians took me by surprise, cause I did get that Guardian trophy. But I guess you're meant to defeat all variations, so a few battles later, I achieve the actual base game completion. Hooray! And this is not really related, but I managed to find that elusive altar I was searching for the part 2 video. Anyway. That pretty much wraps up DLC 1. There wasn't a ton of new content added, but that music player was a great way to celebrate Sonic's musical history. But coming up next, we've got something a little bit greater to celebrate. Update number 2 is an all-out Sonic birthday celebration, promising that, as well as open zone challenges and new Koco. But first, we have to activate the party mode. In Extras, we'll set everything to the birthday option, then jump into the game to check things out. Happy birthday, Sonic. It lags every time. Our most apparent addition will be all the birthday decorating. Sonic's got a hat, and an emblem face mask. The Koco are in party attire, and the HUD has this colorful celebration theme. Let's move this party to Kronos. The whole island has received an overhaul. Collecting rings releases confetti. There's balloons with gifts in the sky, though you can't seem to interact with them. The rails are wrapped in ribbons. These dash loops are hearts and stars. Springs are now cupcakes. And my favorite part, there's balloons in the shape of Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. But it doesn't stop there. Platforms are coated in gift wrap. These panels are decked in streamers. The crates are all gift boxes with bows on top. And even Eggman makes an appearance as a bauble. They really went all out with the party theming, and it makes each of the islands that much more fun to revisit, especially after finishing the game and update number 1. But a party isn't complete without some music, and we have 20 new tracks added as a birthday playlist. The only issue is these aren't added individually, so we can't flip through them. Instead, they take the form of the default track, and we have to listen to it all at once, in one set order. But there's some great additions in here, really fitting for a birthday bash. Collision Chaos, JP, Walking from Knuckles Chaotix, Neo Green Hill from Advance, Studiopolis, even number 1 from Sonic R. And that's just the first 5 tracks. That weird song from Sonic Freeriders even made the mix. Just stay far away from cliffs and keep this awesome soundtrack rolling. But there's more to this party than dancing and decorating, so let's move on to some of our challenges. Up first is the Action Chain Challenges, and these start with no real introduction or explanation, so I started out just collecting as many orbs as possible. Turns out, these are just for the multiplier, and our score is gained by doing actions. What actions, you may ask? Well, basically, any action. Grinding rails, hitting springs, collecting rings, fighting enemies. Just get that multiplier up there and chain anything and everything together. It's easy once you get the hang of it. It doesn't keep you confined to one area either, which has it feeling pretty freeing, but that also leaves each challenge lacking some unique characteristics. Theoretically, you could do all of one island's challenges in the same spots. The only difference would be each one's starting point. With this in mind, I can't help but notice the repetitive nature of it. Nonetheless, it never got boring, and watching that letter D climb up to an S will never get old. After S ranking all 40 of them, we'll have ourselves a nice reward. The Spindash is unlocked. Now, it may seem a bit odd to celebrate the unlocking of a move that is essentially Sonic's very earliest move learned, but it's kind of a big deal. Many things changed in the series when shifting to the boost style, and the Spindash just wasn't compatible with the new gameplay. The boost style is all about keeping things moving, so there isn't time to stop and charge. In this time, the move was mainly given to Sonic only in 2D settings, with Lost World being the only exception to this. Frontiers added in the drop dash, which in itself is notable, as it's the first time this move was seen in 3D. But having a drop dash before a spin dash feels like a missed step. Now, all of that is set right, as Update 2 adds in an actual spin dash. I really like that it's performed by using the crouch button, just like old times. But it's also possible to roll straight into the move by holding L2, which is what I ended up doing a majority of the time. This also creates a scenario where you can drop into a spin dash without it being a drop dash. While you also have the option of doing a drop dash, it just takes more presses than dropping into a spin dash. Did you get all that? In 2D games, the drop dash and the spin dash are effectively the same once releasing the charge on the ground. But here in Frontiers, the two moves have some big differences. They both will have you roll with a boost in speed, but the drop dash has a limited travel before slowing down and putting you on your feet again, while the spin dash will just keep going, maintaining speed so long as your boost meter isn't drained. The drop dash will keep you in a roll for a set amount of time unless you cancel it with a jump, whereas the spin dash will end as soon as you release the button. The drop dash has a much more limited turning radius, keeping you headed mainly forward, while the spin dash gives you the freedom to turn, make loops in the ground, and switch directions at will, all while keeping that roll. But I think the most substantial difference in these two moves is the velocity. The drop dash will mostly keep you close to the ground, hugging the hills as you roll over them. But the spin dash, that will have you launching in the air at just about any upward angle. Playing around with this momentum is incredibly satisfying. I can sit here for an extended period of time just trying to gain as much air as possible. I'm sure this may break some of the platforming segments by bypassing the intended challenge, but this is a worthy trade-off. This really harkens back to the design of the classic games, where you use only your speed and a slope to get to where you want to go. And it would be interesting to see how the next 3D game could be handled if it's designed with these physics in mind. Oh, also, you can roll now. I mean, the most basic form of the roll. This looks ridiculous in the absolute best way possible. Okay, our other big addition added to Update 2 is the new Koco. And initially, I wasn't sure if this would be a challenge or a new look for the little guys. Turns out, it's a bit of both. So these special Koco can be found in specific locations, and these are all marked on the map. But there's more to it than just going there, as each of the Koco are waiting at the end of a new platforming challenge. These were made specifically for these new Koco, and range from creative to frustrating. These certainly raise the difficulty a bit from any of the base game's platforming segments. And it's nice to get some challenges this time around that aren't reliant on a timer. Sometimes the challenge comes simply from finding the relevant platforms that start the challenge, but getting through it will lead us to the special Koco. These guys seem to be playing dress up, or getting an early start to their Halloween costumes. We'll find a pirate, a king, a ninja, and a lone ranger. Though my favorite is the one in possession of Excalibur. This one makes me wish they were all some kind of reference. These Koco are repeated across the other challenges on each island, and they surround you when idle, just like the normal Koco do. So the rewards for doing this go beyond hoarding bigger Koco for their appearance. If we visit our old friend, the Elder Koco, he'll increase our boost gauge a bit for each special Koco obtained. I mean, I could already do an infinite boost, but this does save the trouble of drawing that symbol anytime I want to go an extended distance. With the boost gauge maxed out, there's one final reward to be gained from completing all the challenges. It's not only the Koco who get to dress up, as Sonic is given the Frontier Elite outfit as a completion bonus. This crown looks so slick on him. It's about time royalty is recognized. Before moving on from DLC 2, there's something I want to check out. The Extras menu shows customization for Sonic, Koco, and the island, all of which we've seen. But there's also an option for his friends, and since this was a post-game save with full completion, we never got the chance to see our buddies in party mode. So let's load an older save. We've got Amy, Knuckles, and Tails, all in Cyber Celebration. And Knuckles' hat is in his signature green. Nice. It's kind of funny watching these more serious scenes with everyone in birthday hats, especially Sonic with the goofy glasses. So I wanted to see if these additions are available from the start. Oh yeah, there's a New Game Plus now, but this won't be a serious run. Starting a new game in a separate profile, we can see that it's all still there. The party outfits, the decorations, even the jukebox. This all gives the game a completely different vibe. And it's a bit surprising they didn't limit this to an endgame save to preserve the tone. But no matter, you're free to play as you choose. Finding Sage, we see that she is a total party pooper by not dressing up. And sadly, Big the cat didn't partake either. Guess I can't blame the guy for being so oblivious. The first two updates were quite a bit of fun to jump into. New challenges, new visuals, old songs, all things that were cool to experience, but only really acted as extra little bonus contents. Though DLC 3 is shaping up to provide so much more. Update number 3 is the one we all were waiting for, with the return of multiple playable characters that haven't been utilized for many years in the mainline series, as well as a new story that will hopefully round everything out and build upon what was featured in the base game. After letting the game update, we'll see version 1.4 in the title screen, and we're prompted about the new Another Story. Before we even begin, we'll see some additional save slots added specifically for this new adventure, which I was pretty happy to see. Having only 3 slots is pretty limiting for what I'm trying to do here. And these new ones feature a pretty neat design. Anyway, I load into my complete save and look for the new story entrance. It's a giant portal ring. It immediately made me think of the movie's dimension-hopping ring, but then again, ring portals are nothing new for Sonic. So we teleport from Oranos to... Oranos. So this part of the story seems to be taking place after his friend's sacrifice on Rhea, and before the final battle. The goal for our new trio is to find the Chaos Emeralds. Hold up, didn't we do that already, as Sonic? Unless this is meant to replace the whole Oranos section. Funny that I'd access it after completing the whole original island then. Though you can access it from a less than complete save, essentially acting as an alternate path if you didn't want to go the normal route. With our new plan solidified, we're almost ready to take action. But I contemplated a lot about the best way to proceed with my review, as this update is formatted differently than updates 1 and 2. So to keep things best in order and give my full commentary, I figured I'd follow the story segments and brief mechanic introductions first, then we'll swing back around where I'll really break everything down. We start out as Amy, as she was our first ally back on Kronos. Many of Sonic's moves are going to be shared between his friends to keep things somewhat consistent, so we can still boost, sidestep, and side-loop, among other things. But Amy's first jump doesn't put her into a ball, leaving her vulnerable if she were to try to attack this way. This is just like in Sonic Advance, where Amy doesn't get the spin jump. Though here in Frontiers, her double jump will put her into a spin. Amy's unique move will be this card float, acting as a hover. I'm guessing it's the Cyber Realm making this card trick possible. And when it comes to battles, Amy has this card attack. Seems they're really going with the tarot card angle over her usual hammer style. Though she does still wield the hammer in some capacity. Going into the skill tree, we can unlock some of these additional moves, just like in the base game. Though to get the skill points, we'll need to seek out these new skill Koco. They're found in various platforming segments across the map, along with similar Koco that actually reveal parts of the map. Oh yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning that our Oranos map has been completely reset, leaving us to chart it all again. But this process will be a bit different from the OG Oranos map drawing. the map Koco set it apart, and the normal map challenges we have are different from those seen before. The ancient rails will also need to be replaced, and looking around, we'll see all new platforms scattered across the island. These, in a sense, help the familiar island feel brand new. We'll see colorful platforms and ribbons all over, and with time, we'll realize that these are actually color-coded for each character. So naturally, we have Pink or Amy. So we're given as much time as we need to get acquainted with Amy and the island exploration, but we'll soon need to continue with the story quests. Amy will follow the objective marker to 2 empty vaults, then to the Elder and Hermit Koco. Nice to see them get some story inclusion. Amy gets rejected at the first active vault, and then we're on to Knuckles' part. His unique move will of course be gliding, and it's awesome to finally have some off-the-ground traversal. Knuckles' other unique ability will be his climb, though I was a bit bummed to see it doesn't work with the cliff sides. Instead, he'll have these designated red panels to climb up, and he can also use the blue ones that Sonic used. Our Echidna's attack will obviously be his punches, but, they're on fire. Not really sure how he manages that. Knuckles also has his skill tree for new moves, and his skill points come from the skill Koco with a red ribbon. The red map Koco will further complete the map, adding onto the shared map between allies. But now that we're well acquainted with Knuckles and how he explores the island, we'll continue our quests. The Knucklehead does what he does best and destroys these 2 impact forms before being rejected by his emerald. Now it is Tails' turn, and his unique ability is flight, of course. This flight is glorious. This whole time, I wanted nothing more than to explore these islands from a higher vantage point, and playing as Tails feels so freeing. He's got limited energy, like usual, but he manages to cover a good range. When it comes to fighting, Tails doesn't use his fists, or even his tail attack. Instead, he summons these cyber wrenches that can attack from a bit of a distance. Just like the other 2 characters, Tails has a skill tree for new moves, accessed with skill points from Yellow Skill Koco. And he fills out the map with the aid of the yellow map Koco. So once we're well acquainted with our favorite fox's moves, we'll continue our story. Tails chases after 2 Koco devices, hacking them to release the locks on the prior Emerald Vaults, as well as a 3rd one for his own Emerald Vault. So now we have 3 gems down, 4 to go, and at this point, we switch over to Sonic. I wasn't super stoked to see him return for this section, since he already had plenty of time to shine. But roaming around the island as Sonic, we'll see that there isn't much for him to do here. There's no color-coded blue platforms, or Sonic-exclusive map Koco, so he's not taking much away from the others in this regard, though we can still have him complete some of the neutral challenges if we want, but I'll save those for the trio. Our goal as Sonic is to ascend these newly erected towers, very similar to what we did back at Rhea Island. Though there's a bit more challenge in these ones, they really test your platforming mastery, as well as your grip on the game's physics. At the top of the tower, we meet a pilot of one of the Titans, and we're given a little trial.
Please, I live for time trials. Let's go already.
We gain their approval and proceed to the 2nd tower. This one was a bit of a nightmare to climb, as this breakable panel didn't seem to want to respawn. Not to mention, I was already kind of over the vertical climb, cause, again, Rhea Island. But reaching the top, we get our second trial.
Please, I live for time trials.
Apparently killing 4 shell enemies in 2 minutes is enough to appease the ancients. We climb our third tower, which was at least better than the last, and complete another trial.
I live for time trials.
This section really drags on as Sonic steals the spotlight. A contrast to the other characters' quick and snappy story quests so far. But we climb up a 4th tower and complete a 4th trial, correlating with a 4th Titan pilot that Sonic's not meant to know about yet. But after that, we finally switch back to the trio. More specifically, Amy. We're free to spend as much time as we'd like, progressing our skills and island completion, but let's continue on with the story. With the threat looming closer, Amy's mission is to deliver the Koco to safety. And upon reaching the locked Emerald Vault, her cyber corruption increases. Tails' self-doubt continues, and Knuckles is free to do what he's gotta do, and then continue on to destroy 2 more impact forms as his corruption grows stronger. Tails is then free to... you get the idea. And then he hacks 3 times, releasing Emeralds 4, 5, and 6, taking on more corruption. Then we switch back to Sonic for the 5th and final tower. At the top, Sonic meets the Master King Koco, the leader of all the Ancients. Just like the prior 4 Ancients, this guy has a trial for us to complete.
Time trials.
But this time, it's not just some regular battles, it's a rematch with the Titans. Again. But this time around, they do give a bit more of a challenge. Our stats will be fixed, we'll have an emphasis on timed parries, and we're given 400 rings total that must last between battles, with no refills. Oh, and Master King will float around us as we do business. Although the stakes are raised in this scenario, it wasn't enough to really have these battles feel fresh. Let's just say that after Battle Rush, I'm spent on these fights. They were awesome on the first playthrough, great on my second, lost me in the Battle Rush, and I loathe them in the Master King trial. Why the recycled content? These updates have ruined the Titans for me. Now, I've come to hate every little detail about these things. The weird gravity when Sonic's running on them, where you can't decide if he wants to run up, slide down, get stuck in a crevice, put the camera inside the Titan, or just fall off completely. And the slowdown effect is just annoying at this point. All of these cutscenes that you have to watch over and over and over and over and over and over again. Or the fact that the focus is clearly the Titan fight, but you have to do all this extra stuff beforehand. The eternity you have to wait for Wyvern to even show up, and then the slight leap of faith you have to do before his target will appear. The QuickTime events? That's it. Just the QuickTime events in general. Or how about this shield section where it bogarts my camera by completely flipping my x-axis inversion? And this. I'm not even mad about this one. I was so over these trials that after about a minute of shock, I just started laughing. Not once did I ever run into this in any of my night battles, no matter how close I stood. So what a time to find this out. They definitely could have implemented these in a better way. Many fans wanted a way to replay the Titans, but they didn't get that in Update 1. Those were a joke. And then they're forced upon you in Update 3, during the story. Conceptually, how does this even fit into the story? Sure, Sonic kills them in the base playthrough, But then what? Minutes later, this guy revives them just to test Sonic with 400 rings instead of 900? Or is this in some form of memory? Why would this even be his choice of trials anyway? They've already been defeated, just before reaching this island. And apart from the recycled redundancy, the difficulty spike here is insane. Which I'd be more okay with that if this was something new, but retrying continuously in a story-mandated section with battles I've already conquered just isn't fun. But I don't want to dwell here for too long. With seconds to spare, I completed the trials, and I'm on my way. After all that, Master King Koco grants Sonic the promise of a new power, and we refight Supreme to progress the story, which is a pretty easy battle with all of our upgrades. We then get to witness a new iteration of Supreme, being fed extra energy by the Dark Moon, the End. This scenery looks incredible. The looming moon, the red and purple lighted effects, Supreme End's terrifying crawl towards us. Even these trees look real cool, the way they circle around our arena. Though it's very easy for them to get in the way. I tried this battle a few times, but he kept regaining his health, so it looks like we'll have to find another way. We can ask Master King for some battle guidance, but it seems he has quite the stipulation. Essentially, he's asking for completion, with the training likely referring to each character's skill tree, or power, defense, speed, and ring levels. Cyberspace being levels we haven't seen yet. Uncover the Island being the map. Powerful enemies, some revised guardians. And befriending inhabitants could be character interactions, or discovering each of the Koco. If you know me, you know that completion is right up my alley, though I usually tend to save it for the post-game. No matter, this gives us a bit of a neat reason for doing it all, as well as giving me an opportunity to discuss each element in detail now that our story quests are mostly finished off. From this point on, we are free to play as any character we wish, and are able to come back to this spot to switch between them at any time. So onward with our missions. One cool thing to note is that the location of this final tower is that spot in the base game that we were restricted from going to. Guess this area was planned to be important from early on. Looking at the map, or at least what's available of it, we'll find icons for most things needed to fuel our completion. And I'll start my re-review beginning with the island in general. Prior to this update's release, I was wondering if our trio of characters might be limited to cyberspace levels due to their digital state holding them to that realm. But thankfully, they got to enjoy island exploration, which is really what I wanted from them. This is limited to Uranus though, which is understandable when you consider the island had to be rebuilt for them. All of the non-organic infrastructure we played around with as Sonic has been removed and replaced with platforms and panels to better suit our new trio's abilities. There really is a whole island's worth of content added that feels fresh and new, but contrasts the familiar terrain. But if they were gonna go and give an island's worth of content, why not just give us a new island? The number's already skewed from the main game, so what's just one more? I mean, I know Uranus is an important setting, but having dual setups, depending on which path you chose for Act 5, seems a bit odd. So is there just two different configurations for this island, and Supreme comes around to redecorate when Sonic's not looking? Jokes aside, the Uranus Island works fine. It just kinda makes me wish this scenario, with the 3 extra characters, made up this section from the start, so we didn't end up with 2 parallel stories representing this island. But the characters are really the star of the show, so let's rejoin them with a closer look. Each character gets a new soundtrack that plays exclusively when you play as them. These carry a similar vibe to the island movement tracks. But add in some additional elements, like vocals,
If you trust your colors, there could be another.
or percussive beats. These songs really keep the section feeling exciting, and despite the tracks playing continuously when using any one character, I never got bored or annoyed at hearing them repeat. Tails and Knuckles' themes even sort of sound like some of the Cyberspace vibes are slipping out and entrancing the island's airwaves.
It's time to take it slow. Let the blood inside you flow.
Color coding each platform for whoever is meant to use it, I think was a good decision. You're given 3 unique characters in quick succession, each with unique traversal mechanics, all occupying the same plane. So having that be instantly recognizable as you explore keeps it from feeling tedious. However, if this was a full game featuring this character switch mechanic, I think it might be better to have a more organic approach to any of these segments, letting you apply what you know about each one's abilities without being told outright. So I'd like that to be taken into consideration for whatever's next. But for the purpose of this smaller DLC section, it works well. Having the Map Koco and Skill Koco be the prize for traversing platform segments feels a bit more substantial than Sonic's medal collecting. And having these guys being color-coded as well encourages you to switch between characters frequently, so you're not just using your favorite one to fill out the entire map. But let's talk character specifics. Amy always feels like a wild card when it comes to her mechanics throughout the series. Give her a hammer. Have her being chased. Take away her Spindash. Give her a double jump. This time around, it's her affinity for tarot cards, which is nice to see this side of her getting more recognition lately. The only issue I have with it though, is it maybe isn't the most natural move for Amy. What is it about tarot cards that makes her float? Besides maybe some cyberspace voodoo. E102, Omega, and Dr. Robotnik each have a hover, which feels natural due to their robotic attributes. And Silver has his levitation that stands out since it doesn't decrease in altitude, while fitting perfectly with his psychokinesis repertoire. Even if she's channeling some sort of magic from the tarot, I just don't see Amy and think float or hover. Nonetheless, that's the moveset she's given, and it at least does enough to set her apart from Sonic. And one thing I do like about it, that many other hovers don't have, is this height boost given to us before the actual hovering takes place. This mechanic can also work sort of like a triple jump, taking Amy to high areas before gracefully floating down. This float will carry you indefinitely, so you can reach faraway areas provided you started out with enough height. You can also cancel out of the float, letting yourself freefall and seamlessly transition back into the move at any point, letting you land more accurately. Switching over to Knuckles, his abilities were the ones I was most excited to try out due to how liberating they feel in other games. I already mentioned I was a bit bummed that he couldn't climb up anything like in other games. and that does take away some of the fun, but there is still a good amount of climbable structures scattered around. Unfortunately, his climbing can often feel frustrating, as getting too close to an edge will have him slide down or even fall. This is not something you see in any other Knuckles climbing instance, where edges do nothing more than stop you in place. I feel this quirk could be a leftover from Sonic's climbing mechanic, where it makes more sense since he's often running, and losing your footing can happen easily. This definitely should have been tweaked for Knuckles. When going from a glide to a climbable surface, there's also a good likelihood of him hitting it and falling, adding to the frustration. When, again, in other circumstances, he can go from a glide to a climb pretty seamlessly. Unfortunately, Knuckles' issues don't stop at climbing. Controlling Knuckles' glide feels really off. I'm not sure how best to describe this. Like a sailboat with a huge hole in the sail? I don't know. What I do know is his turning is done much too quickly, and is disconnected from the camera's movement, which works best when it's sort of affixed to Knuckles, and turns with his movements. Here, Knux can do a full 180 and face directly into the camera. It's one thing to look at his glide up away from any obstacles, but it's important to look at how it interacts with traversing platforms. It is so easy to miss a pillar due to the relation of his speed with the extremely loose turning. You could be right near it and attempt to adjust slightly, only to have Knuckles soar right by it. And if you do pass it, good luck circling around to try again. Being too close will have him circle around it entirely. And if you give yourself some distance, his turn would be more accurate, but you would have already lost too much of your altitude. Though if all you want to do is glide and land between platforms, you'll have a bit of an easier time, as much of your forward momentum will decrease immediately upon letting go of the glide button, allowing Knux to land in a sensible way. Now, let's switch over to Miles. Tails' flight never had the chance to be fully fleshed out in the 3D titles. It worked pretty well in Adventure, with a quick ascent and nearly as quick descent, covering a decent distance. But what it really lacked was control. Heroes, on the other hand, has a much slower flight, with his two buddies weighing him down. But this also provides much more control in exchange for height and distance. And 06? This flight can be easy to lose control of, with it yanking the camera around. But when you manage to hold it steady, it's a good compromise between speed and distance. Frontiers, in comparison to the prior 3 attempts, seems to really have a handle on what makes Tails' flight fun, and for the most part, stress-free. This mechanic can be split into 3 parts. The ascent happens all at the start, giving Tails a good aerial boost right away before reaching his limiting height. Once this limit is reached, we can go for distance, keeping Tails at a steady and consistent altitude as we travel a pretty generous distance. And lastly, we have the descent, where Tails gets tired but allows himself to fall slowly for a safe landing. Much like Amy's float, we can interrupt Tails' flight to let him fall a bit, before resuming seamlessly where we left off. Though it's important to note his energy won't recharge until he lands. But Tails' flight isn't perfect, as it shares a pretty substantial detriment with Amy's float and Knuckles' glide. Each of these moves start out with a bit of a hesitation, a sort of charge you have to wait through before pulling off your intended traversal. This really puts a damper on the satisfying feeling of performing these abilities. I can give Amy's a bit of a pass since it does give you that boost as a sort of triple jump before hovering. But Tails and Knuckles just feel restricted. Imagine Tails lingering in the air a while before flying in his race against Robotnik. Or Knuckles loafing around a couple seconds before each and every glide in Pumpkin Hill. It's just never been a limitation before, and I can't see why it would be added now. It's not so bad if you only consider it for long distance travel, but if you're doing anything close range, and you just want to fly a bit or glide to your next platform, it's a total drag. Just imagine Sonic's jump having a full second of input lag. And that's essentially what playing as Tails and Knuckles feels like. My other gripe with how the new characters control comes mostly down to button mapping. Sonic Frontiers is the first game to map Sonic's boost to a shoulder button, and this is important because it leaves your thumb free to manipulate the camera and manage your jumps. But the float, fly, and glide are all mapped to your lower face button, so attempting to move the camera during puts your hand in this awkward position. I think it would greatly improve our movement if these were instead mapped to R1, at least outside of battle, or even on R2, replacing the boost when in the air. But while we're talking about moving moves around, let's talk about consistency. Sonic Frontiers was built to accommodate Sonic in this new playstyle, so when adding others in, they have to conform a lot to that initial design. So all our characters can double jump, boost, Psyloop, Spindash, Quickstep, Stomp, and Fight. But there's one strange omission from only one character. Tails does not have the ability to use the homing attack, which in itself is fine, he usually doesn't, but Knuckles usually doesn't either, and here he does. They're both capable of the move, and they've both went without. It just seems like an odd inconsistency. I'm all for Amy having it, since she's a hedgehog, and has used it various times in the past. And I'm guessing Tails omits this move to better aim his wrenches, though the consequence of this is pretty apparent in his object interactions. So some other way to grapple towards objects would be nice. Knuckles, on the other hand, could have some sort of homing glide to feel more in tune with his character. And I'd gladly give up his double jump to get into his glide with less button presses. All I'm saying is they could have made their abilities fully cohesive with the original design, or played around a bit more with balance, trading out certain abilities for each. Instead, we have this odd in-between. But let's move away from the downsides and look at some of our premium moves. Filling out the skill tree adds a little bit here and there, but each character unlocks special moves that require full ring count. In fact, Knuckles gets 2. This on-ground drill boost is alright. But taking to the skies, we have this fiery infinite glide that doesn't lose altitude. Pretty crazy. Even crazier is the speed. Knuckles can move over and across the island like a missile. Now, this doesn't do us any favors as far as platforming goes, unless you're seeking to connect each of the towers. Tails has gotten a bit of an aerial upgrade as well. His normal flight is unchanged, but replacing his boost is the old Cyclone. What a blast from the past. I'll be honest, I kind of hated this thing in Adventure 2, because it made Tails not really feel like Tails. But here in Frontiers, it's doing incredible things. It completely unlocks the skies for Tails, letting him fully explore the troposphere while piloting this aircraft. You can start at ground level and skyrocket your way to just about the highest point with your allotted 2 boost wheels. Or you can go infinite, letting the fun fly everlasting. This is the most OP move in the game, taking any challenge away from Tails' uncompleted platforms. But man, is it fun. Oh yeah, Amy gets a new move as well. This Wheel of Tarot cards. I guess this is fun. You can drift with it, and gain some air, much like the Spindash. Though I do like how she rides her hammer, like a witch's broom. These upgraded boosts unfortunately don't come without a downside though. That same charge, or lag, or hesitation is added here too. We've went the whole game being able to boost with instant gratification, so it feels excruciating to be held back now, especially when I can see my intended destination just ahead. And have fun boosting away from enemy threats with this. Your boost does return back to normal after taking damage, but it's silly to have to seek out an enemy and get hit just so I can boost without lag. To finish off talking about characters, it's only appropriate we speak about the Blue Boy himself. The first time I switched back to Sonic during the story mode quests oddly felt very relieving. The constraints of the other characters don't apply for him. This is in contrast to the Genesis games, where Sonic was left in the dust by his acquaintances. The new abilities are awesome, but are really held back by awkward control and unnecessary charge. And I wonder if any of that was intentionally hindered to make Sonic shine the brightest. Just a thought. But there's a good reason why, when I made my first Frontiers video, I discussed Sonic's movement towards the very start, and really spent my time discussing it. Sonic's movement and how it feels is probably the most important aspect when designing a Sonic game. I think they just about nailed it with Frontiers, so it's a shame that his lifelong friends didn't get the same treatment. It's passable, but could be better. But let's look at Sonic's involvement in the DLC. My focus was certainly on the new playable characters, but maybe that wasn't the case for the devs. Sonic had far more to do in the story quests, and it kind of gave off similar vibes to KH3 Remind, where the main character has trouble stepping out of the spotlight. Look, I know the title of the game is his name. Just let him take a little break. Never mind, break's over, because we've got another set of goals that's exclusive to Big Blue. So besides the new map configuration for the island, the levels have also been completely replaced for this update. Instead of levels 4-1 through 4-9, we now have 4-A through 4-I, 9 new levels. These are only accessible with Sonic, which is understandable. Although letting all 4 characters run through them using separate ability paths would have been pretty exciting, I could see the extra work balancing them for this instance would be a lot to ask. Actually, it's interesting to note that these levels are completely optional. They reward you with Lookout Koco that you use for the story quests, but I already found so many of those around the island without even understanding what they were for. So I didn't even try my first level until after attempting the big boss. With all that said, the levels themselves were pretty fun to play through, and there's enough new stuff added to keep them feeling fresh. I mean, the same themes are used, the same repeated backdrops from the main game, but there's new mechanics featured, like the rocket boost, a burst of speed that limits your control of Sonic. Invisible mines you must do your best to avoid. A ticking time bomb that you can add extra time to. A rev meter that will stall Sonic if you exceed the limit. And low gravity that will have you moon jumping between these eerily placed white cars. And that's just the main level gimmicks. I haven't even covered the DLC's replacement for the key challenges. You can race a hologram Tails, which essentially acts as a timed trial. So, S-ranks kind of void this. There's silver moon rings you must collect in quick succession, and you may recognize these from Forces. There's also green number rings you have to collect in order. These ones were featured in Lost World, but also made an appearance in Forces. There's hidden goals in some levels that require additional skill or exploration to reach. But my favorite new addition is Sonic giving a helping hand to his non-anthropomorphic animal friends. Really takes me back to simpler times. In these trials, you seek out Flicky, Pecky, Picky, Pocky, Ricky, Rocky, and Cookie as you escort them a short distance with a limited moveset. These new side activities really encourage you to explore the levels more. The red rings did a fine job of that, but hearing an animal calling nearby will have you looking for him and then his friends. Finding a moon medal will have you urgently seeking out the others before they disappear. And collecting that green number 1 will have you charting your way forward in a more deliberate manner. Though that's not to say there's no merit in just speeding your way through. These levels turn up the difficulty, so just reaching the end is an accomplishment on its own. And if we're going to collect all of our S ranks, we'll need to implement a new strategy. Those asterisks I mentioned earlier are completely gone in these levels. You're encouraged to give it your all, with everything at your disposal. That means that mastering the Spindash will go a long way in our quest to perfect these levels. My only complaint is that these level segments still have a separate set of physics than that of the islands, so that can lead to some frustrating losses. And it's surprising that these were all optional when the actual story quests gave us repeat battles. I'd happily take new levels over old titans. It's a more fitting trial for Sonic anyway, but I'll come off that point. With the levels completed, we have them checked off our map, and we can move on to the Guardians. Battles were a pretty important part of Sonic Frontiers, and so they made a comeback in Update 3. Well, sort of. They are again completely optional, just like the levels, as there's plenty of portal gears scattered across the island. And I did all the story quests, even the levels, before defeating even one Guardian. Before we take anything on, it's best if we fully upgrade ourselves. Each character's skill tree will be completed pretty easily, assuming you've been visiting the skill Cocos, and there will be plenty of skill points to spare once they're all obtained. I like the idea of a skill tree for each of our new characters, but it didn't feel very necessary. Most of the moves you unlock are pretty basic, not totally necessary, and are unlocked fairly quickly, so there's no substantial difference in the before and after when obtaining these moves. The moves that interact with these special signs are fine enough, since they at least act as a barrier to overcome in some sections. And Tails' Cyclone Blast is necessary to get into one locked area. The super boosts I discussed earlier make sense to be some of the final and most expensive upgrades. But overall, the skill tree just kind of amounts to something to do, and it's done so easily you hardly notice. And again, if this was a full game's worth of content, it would be fine, but it feels pretty pointless for such a short section. But once that's done, we're far from done with our upgrades. Just like Sonic, the trio have power, defense, speed, and ring levels to fill, each ranging from 1 to 100. There's a fair amount of seeds at the end of many of the new platforms, but fully upgrading that way will take an eternity, so we'll need to find a faster way. I didn't realize this at first. I guess sometimes I just don't read. But the Starfall meteor showers will now provide you with necessary upgrade materials. I completely missed this for much of my playthrough because I was simply so sick of seeing these events from the main game. So I did just the same and ignored them as the new 3. It doesn't help that turning off the reel was touted as a new feature. This is also the same reason I completely overlooked the fact that the star shards are replaced with chili dogs for the birthday celebration.
So tasty.
Anyway, now that we're all up to speed, we'll want to take full advantage of these light shows, because we've got 1,200 levels total to raise. Thankfully, the Elder Koco has finally caught on to our struggles, and can now upgrade many levels at once. With all of this out of the way, I think we're ready to fight. Update 3 has added some cool new enemies, and by new enemies, I actually mean old favorites. Somehow, some badniks have been released, replacing the usual Starfall offensive. Motobugs can be found on platforms, and will stop at nothing to run you over. Spinners will protect certain areas, using their electro fields to fend you off. Turrets will give you an endless stream of ammunition to home into, at least until you defeat them. And buzz bombers will float on high, ready to attack at a moment's notice, so long as you don't get them first. As nice as it is to see old enemies, we've got some bigger fish to fry, ones that don't involve a big cat. Update 3 has revised some of our guardians. There's 16 icons across the map, and none of these are completely new, but some of their strategies and attack patterns have been completely reworked. Master Ninja is mostly the same. Silver Hammer is faster and less predictable. Tank and Caterpillar get right into the action, removing the whirlwind and rails, and replacing them with an onslaught of projectile attacks. And Spider is almost a completely different fight, no longer launching us into the sky. We now Psyloop these spike mines and send them at him to deactivate his shield. It's nice to see these battles changed up some, but the Guardian is only half of the battle. The other side is us, or the character we choose. As much as I hate to admit this, I think the Ghost battles are miles better than any other Guardian. They each feel different from one another, and they're the only ones that seem to take character abilities into account. There's far-off pillars, best traversed by Knuckles' glide, as well as pink and yellow platforms urging you to try as the other two. But no other battle really plays off each one's strengths, so I might as well just send out Sonic. But I didn't. I wanted to push myself to fight as our new team. It'd be a shame not to put those battle skills to use anyway. I started out with Knuckles. He is our brawn after all. And I sent him after Caterpillar, Spider Plus, Silver Hammer, Master Ninja Plus, and Ghost. I thought for sure he would take them down with ease, due to his levels and perceived strength. But that wasn't the case. Attacking normal hardly did any damage to anything. This is pretty strange. After going the whole game being confident, your attacks will, hurt. And this kind of ripped away my excitement of using these new characters in battle. There is a way to do damage. Our parries now have a timing aspect, something that was missing from the base game. And this is what creates a window to attack. Works pretty well for Master Ninja. Unfortunately, that's the only battle that felt fun to fight. The up-close hand-to-hand combat with no defenses to deactivate. Try this parry window on any other boss, and the time you get is laughably short. Better hope they don't attack from any distance. I gave Tails 2 ghosts. It just makes the most sense for him to do these, and they went smoothly since the enemy's damage is not tied to actual attacks. But I also gave him 2 tanks to fight. I thought his projectile wrenches would give me an upper hand in battle, as well as his increased mobility. But besides the wrenches doing microscopic damage, the poor lock-on in this game makes this attack essentially useless. The second the enemy moves off screen, Tails just throws these wrenches into the wind. That's why I settled with only tanks, as they don't tend to move much. To finish off the Guardians, I gave Amy Spider Plus, Caterpillar, and Silver Hammer. The parry windows were about the same with her, so not much use. A lot of the damage given was from this card spin attack, which helped things a little, though I mostly ended up just brute forcing these Guardians, chipping away health slowly, then running for a ring recharge. I get that the devs wanted to up the difficulty a bit, which I can get on board with, but this is not the way to do it. These battles aren't hard due to a genuine challenge being added that we have to learn and overcome. The difficulty comes from not falling asleep as the battle drags on, leaving us open to enemy attacks. I admit, there could be something I'm not doing right. Maybe the key to these battles is just side-looping each and every one of them. But at that point, are we even battling? What's the point of all these unique moves and an actual parry if we're not free to use them in a substantial way? Especially when I went all of the base game in hard mode, having little trouble with how I choose to fight. I switched these to easy mode, they still take forever. I know there was very little room to work with inside this DLC, so each character doesn't get 4 full islands to gradually progress through, getting stronger over time. But there's little point in trying these out if you're not fully leveled up. And even then, there's not much fun in tackling these guys. You can bypass them completely, so who are these even made for? With the battles out of the way, we can look at the main purpose for doing this all, the story. The main storyline in Final Horizon didn't offer all that much. Essentially, Sonic's friends collect the Chaos Emeralds for him, instead of him doing it himself. Tails and Knuckles have almost no story involvement, apart from go to the spot to get the thing. Amy has a slight bit more impact interacting with the Elder and Hermit Koco, but the only new story events that feel somewhat substantial are the Sonic Tower sections. It still isn't much, but the idea of Sonic speaking with these ancient beings, even their leader, is a pretty cool premise that goes beyond unlock the vault. However, with that said, I feel that in doing this, it sort of undermines the mystery the base game set up. This is an ancient civilization that our team has trouble wrapping their heads around. They use their own knowledge and experiences to best describe what they're seeing, but it's all still so removed from their own understandings. They piece it all together as best they can, and do everything in their power to help, only getting short glimpses into the ancient life and the events that unfolded way back then. And then Sonic just stands face to face with these guys, chatting like it's nothing. Even going so far as mocking the leader.
And now you're a rock in a chair.
The main game did give Sonic glimpses of these pilots, but these still felt removed, like a distant cry from the past. Now he's just conversating directly, like they aren't thousands of years apart. And I'm not sure why they really wanted to cement the idea that a fourth Titan would be a total surprise, but here he is, speaking to the original pilot, completely unsurprised by this surprise. But it does better connect that vision to the lost pilot, and the End's control over Supreme. Much like in the base game, the story has a bit more going on than what is shown in the mandatory cutscenes, as speaking with your acquaintances help reveal a bit more about what is going on. Here in Update 3, there's conversation segments for Amy, Tails, Knuckles, and Sage, just like before. But now there's ones for Sonic, as we're no longer playing exclusively as him. There's even talks to be had with the Mad Doctor himself. Look at him just sitting there in his Eggmobile. Some of these scenes just amount to filler, speaking of what the characters are thinking in that moment. Some of these add in some humor, like when Knuckles is confident that all he has to do is dig for the emeralds, like he's done in the past. But mostly, these reveal even more about the islands, providing insight for previously unanswered questions. We're told that the tunnels were for access to their spaceships. The lights are data left over by the inhabitants. This symbol is in relation to religion. The Guardians respawning is aided by the meteors themselves and their duty to protect the islands. The pinball machine was a very intentional design choice. The rails and panels are not features of the island, but are interpreted that way by Sonic. Which explains why they're all suited for him, but doesn't explain why there's two versions, or that each character sees the other character's platforms. The islands are void of much animal life because they were evacuated long ago. And the Titans were modeled after other tribes who existed alongside the Ancients, but were ultimately wiped out. These new insights also drop a pretty big bombshell on one of my favorite parts of the game. Apparently Big the Cat was never really there, which is kind of lame. But I refuse to believe that. This is the same guy that has a history of appearing out of thin air, just kind of hanging out in the background of City Escape, or in the world of the Arabian Nights. I have no problem imagining Big just sort of willed himself to these sick new fishing spots, and his power is just too great for Sage to want to accept. But my favorite part of the whole DLC 3 story is this line right here.
Oh, but I suppose that doesn't concern someone like you, who can't do anything but roll around at the speed of sound.
Did Eggman just quote Crush 40?
Roll around at the speed of sound.
All of these new insights were great, but we're obviously not done with the story yet. With the full map completed, we should have done enough to please Master King Koco. Show me the battle guidance. You kidding me? That's it? I wasn't expecting much, but all of that for 2 small blurbs I guess you could call tips? I'd get more info going to the guide section of GameWinners.com. If I needed an actual tutorial, sure, I could just look it up. It's just strange to me that the in-game guidance is that lackluster. Nonetheless, it does do what it's meant to do and tells me how to break the end's umbilical cord. So let's take him on, once and for all. We can now deal permanent damage, and Supersonic's new ability activates, where his eyes go from red to blue. This is a cool new look, but I'll be honest, I must have missed his actual power. Is it the way he swats attacks away like it's nothing? Or the scary death stare that feels straight out of a horror movie? With the power of friendship and Supreme's own gun, Blue Eyes Yellow Hedgehog takes out the final Titan. We don't chase it out to space, like in the base game, but we do see Sonic floating along in a very Adventure 2 looking scenario. The meteors guide him to safety, and the friends are reunited. And this time around, Eggman isn't so lonely at the ending. It looks like the 2 of them get to return home after all, and Sage goes on to sing a very on-the-nose lyric of the situation.
I get to go home with you.
There's a final message thanking us for the support. And we get a little star to show we finished the final story. The New Game Plus option appears on the title screen, though I could have sworn I unlocked that earlier. Maybe you just have to reach the credits again to activate it. But jumping in again with all of our full stats, I really wanted to try sequence breaking with our overpowered Spindash. But it looks like the devs thought ahead and put up some barriers near these gates and over the missing bridge. Darn. I guess that about does it for Final Horizons. The DLC ended in a sweet alternate cutscene, and our completion is already done, in which we traded for battle guidance. I would have liked to see one final reward though. Perhaps a free roam for each of our new characters, taking Knuckles to glide across the sand dunes of Eras, or bringing Tails to Chaos to fly easily up to that area he liked being in so much. Sure, there wouldn't be any of those new platforms or pillars for them to use, but it would just be fun to play as them on other islands, regardless if there was anything specific for them to do. Or a Titan rematch option that isn't tied to Battle Rush or Master King, with new portals appearing in the Titan battle locations, where we can choose to fight the original battle or a new and improved, harder difficulty Titan, without the ring limit. But what can be done has been done, and I certainly got much more than I expected to out of these 3 DLCs. So that marks the end of my Sonic Frontiers DLC review. At least that's where it originally ended. It always takes a long time for me to get these longer videos out, and it sucks to miss all the initial hype, but it does allow me to make sure I'm expressing all of my points to the best of my ability without jumping too early to conclusions. Within reason, of course. But it also gives the developers time to catch up and fix the problems that I have before I even get the chance to release my critiques. A good example of this is Origins Plus, with the Hyper Amy afterimages missing and the broken hammer dash around loop-de-loops. While I was busy editing the Final Horizon section of this video, a patch was released that promised to fix some of the initial issues. so it's only right that I extend this video even further to cover all the adjustments. The full review I did of Update 3 was strictly using version 1.40. I decided it was only appropriate to stick to that version, since not only is it the version I did my full initial playthrough in, it's also the version that I'm guessing the majority of players experienced, since they all would have flocked to it upon release, and finished far before Update 1.41 was even announced. So if I was going to portray my experience with the game in an honest way, I had to stick to my own script and finish every edit before even allowing myself to try out the new patch. It's an effort I hope every Day 1 Final Horizon player can appreciate. And for all you completionists out there who also tackled it all before the patch, we know the same pain, and I hope my words did your struggle some justice. Now, enough being dramatic. For everyone else out there, my criticisms may have sounded a bit odd, as the 1.41 patch ended up fixing quite a few things I had issue with. So let's check it out. Here's the patch notes as provided by Sega on their own website. I was sure to gain some extra footage before allowing the game to update to try and do an accurate before and after. So we'll just go in order. First, there's some adjustments to easy mode. The towers did have some changes when switching to easy mode, mainly these homing balloons lining the intended path. But as you can see in my .40 footage, it's still easy to miss a few spots here or there, and you're forced to watch all your progress slip away as you slowly fall down. .41 essentially turns easy mode into an impossible to lose mode. There's these hoops added all over, thrusting you in the right direction. Springs added that make it so you don't even need to time your jumps. And full sections are skipped, faster than you can even envision what you would be expected to do there. It's interesting to see these layouts change so drastically. In .40, I didn't even realize I still had easy mode enabled after changing it for the battle trial. But speaking of trials, easy mode adjusted these further too. Our attack was still level 1 in .40's easy mode, but .41 levels up our attack to 25. The damage we receive seems to be lessened as well. In my initial playthrough, I struggled with hard mode's trial number 2, so I took the easy way out. And although I wouldn't say it was still a struggle, it wasn't nearly as simple as the new easy mode. Lastly, Master King's trial was adjusted as well. Let me tell you, easy mode on these titans in .40 was still a nightmare. Hence my whole rant section. So I would have gladly taken any relief from this trial. Well, happily, .41 gives our easy mode a 600 ring max, a level 25 attack, and I'm guessing a weaker opponent. I didn't fully test this section with the new adjustments, cause I'm still scarred and sick of the Titans, but hey, it's an improvement. Next up, player control. I tested the parry windows in both versions on all 3 difficulties, but didn't notice much of a difference, though this isn't something I struggled with much to begin with, so I'll take their word for it. The next one is super important. Gliding maneuverability. I expressed my issues with the glide as best I could, but struggled to find the right words to say. It's also clear now with the .41 glide. That sailboat feeling is gone. It doesn't feel like I'm fighting the wind or pulling a kite in a windstorm. Knuckles moves exactly how I'd expect him to, No struggle. It's almost surreal after dealing with the old glide for so long. I even started to get used to it, which could be an explanation for how these things end up getting through testing to begin with. Sadly, I have nothing left to do as our echidna, but should I ever decide to replay this update, I can play Knuckles with a smile on my face. But it gets better. That dreaded hesitation I spent so long describing has been completely removed. Sure, we still have the double jump, so it's 3 presses instead of 2, but Knuckles almost feels exactly how I'd imagine him in a modern game. Tails still lags a bit, but you know what? I'll take it. Next up, special moves. Battles were exhaustingly dull in 0.40. I went over this, but in 0.41? Look how easily these guys go down. I'm in shock. This is in hard mode too. My Guardian review section was all in easy. What a staggering difference. I'd almost say it's too easy now, but then again, after what I'd been through, I wouldn't even dare it. Besides, I am fully leveled up. It would have been nice to have a fair fight without having to max out all stats. At least that's an option now. Moving on, I mentioned those pesky pink panels. In 0.40, I tried waiting, I tried leaving, and I even tried fast travel, but those dang things would never respawn. Unless, you jump off a cliff. But moving over to 0.41, that pink square is back in its rightful place before I even climb back up to it. What a joy to be had. And last but maybe least, though still cool that it's updated, is the Cyberspace level timer resetting automatically. Now this isn't an issue I mentioned in my review, but it is an issue I noticed nonetheless. More so on my base game playthrough. It just makes sense that the beginning would start at 0 every time. I've built up quite the muscle memory of start X down X. I don't know what I'll do with that now. But that's all the notable fixes listed, and it does do a great job of improving the overall experience, even if it does invalidate a large portion of my review. What? You want me to scrap all the work I'd already put in? It's not happening. Better late than not at all. And really, it's for the best. I have to commend those at Sega and Sonic Team for not only the updates, or the meta update to the update, but for doing it all for free. They didn't have to. Frontiers wasn't perfect at release, but it still passed as a full game. And they could have just left it as it was, or even charged for each of the updates. But they didn't, and that's pretty cool of them. I know I had my criticisms, some that still stand, and I know how it looks complaining about something that's free, but it's still a game nonetheless, and shouldn't be void of critique, no matter the size of the price tag. But I've rambled on here for too long. I had a great time with Frontiers itself, had fun speculating the future of the series based off of Frontiers, and even had a blast with each of these updates. But it's time we put the game to rest and continue on our way. Thanks for stopping by, and hopefully, you'll stick around for whatever's next.